governance. I hope you are able to see our screen. We are talking about governance for the automation today. I think Simen need no introduction, but I will just give a brief background about Simen. Simen was ex-CEO at HSBC, Kazakhstan, India, and now he was leading the hubs for ANZ Bank. He was also leading the biggest robotic workforce globally in 4 locations, and I would like to welcome Simen here. We have received a lot of good responses from the participants. It's our honor that Simen is here to share his experience with us.
Thank you. I think that's.
And I will just hand over to Simen to take over to the next steps. Just to give you a brief background, we want to cover more and more questions and answers. So our agenda is mostly inclined towards having more Q&A in the end. But just for benefit's sake, I'm putting the agenda here, which is 1 minute for the introduction, 4 minutes on what, why, and how of the governance, and session 4 will be examples and case studies, what we have encountered in our practical experience, Simen and myself, and then we have questions. We have got about we received about 75 questions, and we have consolidated them into 30 questions, and we will aim to answer those questions in the last session of our webinar, and we have kept about 25 minutes for that. I hope it's fine with everyone. And let's start with what is governance. Historically, if you look at, there are major 5 transformational levers which the companies are using in the past: centralize, optimize, and relocate, and enablement of the IT. But the 6th lever, which has come as enhancement of IT or technology, such as RPA and AI. So this is driving the definition of governance and also the RPA going forward. I will now hand over to Simen to discuss what is governance means in the automated process.
Thank you very much, Mohit, for that very nice introduction. And I appreciate being invited to this. Clearly, from my perspective, if I look at where are we when it comes to governance and what is it to govern, we see huge opportunities in the way we can using robotics. But as with all technology or all process changes you want to do, it introduces risks if you don't do it carefully and properly. So what I would like to talk about is really firstly starting saying what is it you really want to govern. So I think that from my perspective is that RPA really is about how do you drive change in your organization, how do you facilitate change easier than what was the case in the past. So from my perspective, I think that the key element you're looking for is really you want governance which covers purpose. Why are you doing, what are you trying to achieve with the robotics piece so people can buy into this one? You need governance around the agenda in terms of in which places are you going to deploy your RPA? What kind of outputs are you looking for? You need governance around your people. Which people are driving your really critical? You need to have the right people involved. You also want to make sure that we have the right investments. You don't want to make it too difficult for people to figure out where to invest or making their business case, etc. And of course, it's all issues around process and technology, which typically is what people focus maybe more on when they talk about robotics. What I've always been trying to do through governance is to say that good governance makes it easy for people to do the right things. So therefore, you can empower further down in the organization, ideally to the doers. So for me, it's important that people who are actually who's writing the robotics or driving that one, that they are empowered to engage where they need to be. So the other piece for me is then around the role of the RPA Center of Excellence, or when you're looking at this, a very typical setup which people are having is that you will have arrange yourself with a Center of Excellence or Center of Expertise, and I will cover that a little bit in detail, which report into a steering group, and then have RPAs or a COE leader who kind of have the wider organization hanging beneath there. And I think that for me, the issue here really is that this is about driving an organizational culture where you enable the people in this area. And so just see if we can get to the right slide. So to me here, it's really about you want to drive a center. I think that the right wording for this is RPA Center of Expertise rather than Excellence, because for me, expertise illustrates that this is an area people go to learn how to do things, rather than this is a place they're going to get controlled. But this team, centralized area, need to make sure that there's clear visions and plans. They need to keep on developing the right level of governance, so that we don't over-control and not under-control, and try to create patterns which makes it easy. So this is the way you do your automation, so you make them easy to do. They keep track of all the various RPA-based services you need to have access to, so that actually people know that if they're looking to automate a particular activity, it's easy to find someone else who has done it to help make those connections. And given the amount of change which we are seeing in this area, they need to always be looking at the future. So what are they going to do, either with the next version of the software, with different software? Is there new changes in the operating environment which they want to do? So actually quite a lot, Mohit, to do around RPA governance overall. And but more, I'm looking for this more to be an empowering rather than a controlling area.
So Simen, do you think COE should be done in the first phase itself before they start with POC, or after POC, or after going live? So what is the right time to start a POC or COE?
So I think that, to a large extent, as soon as you decide to dip your toes into this, you need to announce someone who is going to own this.
Okay.
So I would say, well, do you call it a formal COE or not? But you need to have people who owns this, and whoever gets the honor of being the first cab off the rank typically ends up being the initial start of the COE.
And we have received a lot of questions regarding the ownership of this whole initiative, RPA governance and COE. And I would like to have your insights when we come to the question and answers, that who should own it, and will the power shifts when it goes live, or it still remains with the person who's initiating it?
So I think that as in any change environment, that this is change using technology, but it doesn't mean that it's only about technology. Indeed, from our perspective, the technology aspect is maybe the least complicated in rolling out RPA. So how I look at this is that the ownership needs to be, or I think the ownership has been most effective in an organization which has it owned by the people who benefits from the RPA solution, but then governed in conjunction with other elements like risk, like technology, like audit. So I think that it must be someone who cares that it's successful, not only that it's governed.
Okay, excellent. So may I ask the participant to please poll on this question, at what stage of RPA journey you are currently at, because it will also help us to design and construct our conversation going forward. in this webinar, because if you're at early stage, you will start talking about the prerequisite you need to go on the journey. If you are at a later stage, what we have learned, we will discuss that. So I will appreciate if you can poll this particular topic so we can start discussing the relevant information for you. So Simon, since they're polling, can I also ask you one thing, that when you started your journey for RPA, what was the main driver for you?
So from my perspective, the main driver was very easy, is that we have a lot of people who were doing work which they were totally overqualified to do. So we were spending human resources on areas where human resources in many cases were ill-advised, or it was not best usage of them. So so obviously, it was about empowering our people, but then also, of course, if we make our people more efficient, we will also save money. But we were also after, in many areas, the only thing humans can do is to add errors. So you were taking out errors, so better control. And then, of course, pace. We wanted faster delivery for customers.
And Simon, when you start any initiative which impacts the working of the employees, what is the positive message you want to start with?
So for us, during my time with ANZ, a key message was really around that, and it was really heartfelt, which is that this is about leveraging our people's capabilities. So it was not about cost saves primarily, but if we really are using our people as efficiently as we can, of course, it creates cost saves.
I think we got a very good response on the poll, and I think 1/3 are still in a very early stage, and 1/4 have gone live. So it's a good mix. It's quite, I think, a good mix to discuss in more areas of our webinar topic, because you have got representation from all the part of the journey. So continuing forward, I would like to put to the next session, which is why we need governance in automation. I think it is a no-brainer why we require governance, because it is to mitigate risk, to be in a strategic direction, to comply with the regulatory requirements, vendor management, knowledge management, controls, reporting. But I think I would like to have your non-theoretical views on why we need a governance.
Not sure, but so I looked at this and I said, so what are we after? Are we after, what's the view in the organization on governance? So I put this up: control freaks hell bent on frustrating business, or value add to your program. And obviously, if you end up that governance is the thing that people want to avoid, then there is a problem. So I kind of split into two things, and I put them in this order for a reason, actually, which is into what you should be focusing on and what you must be doing. So obviously, that you must make sure that automation are deployed in ways which are safe for the organization. That means that it works, the software deployed is configured rightly and efficiently. Secondly, you must ensure that it's secure. That actually the software or the way the RPA tool is deployed minimizes risks of security, internal security breaches. And second, lastly, in this space, from my perspective, is you need to make sure that it's compliant with any regulatory elements you're facing. But even more, I think that what you really need to make sure is that your focus is aligned to the strategy of your organization. So if your organization is really about increasing customer service, we want to be leading on customer service, well, you make sure your robots are targeting improving customer service as a primary objective rather than cost saves. If you are really after that, that you have a problem around error mitigation, and the organization really said that we really want to be high quality, make it to ensure that you get good results from quality perspective. And make sure you measure that actually you are deploying it that way. Secondly, of course, technology in this space, whether you talk about vendor lock-in or whether you're talking about other elements, I think it's really important to have a clear view on technology. And then again, people, I mean, actually you need to make sure that the governance team ensures that they have a responsibility to ensure that the right people are involved in this across the organization, so that if you feel that there are people who are not following the rules, that they are being taken out, and that you install people who are really change leaders and are willing to drive the agenda. So so I think that there is more there, in terms of why than just the must. There is something around the should as well.
So I think the major component of this webinar is how we have to implement the governance for automation. What and why are quite theoretical and they're required, but which differentiates your strategy and RPA journey going forward. So there are different ways to implement how part of governance. It can be centralized, decentralized, ownership, who is sponsoring it, what is the target operating model, what you're currently working in environment, like you have captive, you have third party, you have in-house, and what is the controlling structure, how you have change management for the robots, how you have change management for the people, process. And if you look at all of our slides, we are putting on the top people, process, and technology. I think it is a Simen's mantra that this is a priority for any project you do, whether automation or AI, where we are taking out the human intervention. So people are the first, then the process, and then the technology. So when people say to me, come to me, the clients say that they want to implement this particular tool, I think tool is not important. It is more important how people are taking into it, what the process you have, and the tool come the last evaluation parameters. Simen, any insights?
Yeah, no. So I think that everyone we have all heard people, process, technology, but it really sank into me when someone said, Simen, it's in that order. So if you have the right people with the right attitude, who understands the right process, they will make sure that the technology solution is really effective. So I think that that's a piece here. So to me, again, I think that if you have the wrong people deployed into your RPA approach, no matter how good governance you put in place, it will not work. But if you have great people, they will make the system work even without governance. So I think that the issue here is really around making sure, a huge focus on having, especially for those of you who are really new in this, I think you really need to look to say the people who are engaged in this, are these your change agents? Are these the people you will go to if you want to drive change in the organization? If it's not, then you need to get those change agents in, because it is about having the right people. Yeah, so so one of the key elements I talked about earlier was really around how do you empower the doers. And for those of you who have read the checklist Manifesto, a checklist can be an extremely good way of empowering and making things more efficient and effective. And I've kind of put up here some elements which I think is really important for you to cover, and I would obviously suggest that you are using a checklist approach. So how we see this is that we have a center of excellence or expertise. They create a checklist. That checklist is being approved by a steering group. But then if people are kind of managing within the checklist, to a large extent that deals with the main issues as I see in deployment in this. So, in that area, there's, we will share these slides afterwards, Mohit, so people can see it. So I will not read it aloud. But what I would say is, that you need clear ownership. So who owns this thing, the automation element? And again, I want to push it down as far as possible to the owner, the one who's really benefiting from the automation needs to be the owner of automation. You cannot be a too senior guy because they don't really know. cannot be a too junior guy because they are not empowered. A key element, I think, which we keep on forgetting when it comes to robotics is that typically you suck data out or into things like Excel or other tools which is outside. You expose your data in ways which means that there is an increased risk of losing them. So I think that kind of data protection element is really core to what you want to do. Deployment policies, to me, it's about basic stuff that the people who create a robotic solution are not the people who can put it live. The people who create your solution is not the people who does the user acceptance testing. So actually that that you actually make sure that there is the control, normal kind of control around deployment is in place. In many processes, human processes, we have a concept of 4 eyes or dual control, maker, checker, all these kind of things. There is a big risk that with robotics, you can actually pierce that dual control piece by you have an automated maker. But if you don't protect the way that maker is being fed, you have the risk that the people who's currently doing approval could create a file which could be uploaded to a robot. So that kind of dual control content is really important. Biggest error rates I've seen is about replicated execution control. So this is a little bit like speed control on a car. If you say set it at 35 kilometers an hour, you can keep on giving it that instruction many times. It doesn't matter. It keeps going on 35 kilometers an hour. If you say add 5 kilometers, if you call it many times, you're in trouble. And typically what I say about robots is they cannot dig a new hole that the humans couldn't dig. But boy, they can dig a lot faster. So how do you ensure that you haven't rerun it multiple times? And this is, to me, is the biggest real risk in operational. Second piece is about how do you know that you are in the right screens every time before the robot does something. It should make sure it's in the right screen. Access controls and audit trails. So basically, yes, you get the benefit of access control and audit trails in a different way when you're using robots, but someone needs to care about them. BCP, what if the site, or what if this is not available, what will you do? Generally, I think that robots significantly improves your ability to handle BCP, but it needs to be thought about. Operational risk impact and regulatory considerations, needs to be considered as part of this. So basically, by pulling these things together, making a checklist, having people to check it through, and it's a little bit like going through customs. If you click no to everything, you get the soft touch. But if you fail to do certain things, then you kind of step up the sign-off process. So it helps you drive a simpler process for people as long as they're doing the right things. What I hear from time to time then is people say, well, what if they lie? What if people say they have done it, but they haven't? But that's why, from my perspective, you need a level of oversight over the program. You need to have a second line kind of review. And obviously, if people lie, they are the wrong people. And you don't want to design your process around the wrong people.
So I think this also opens up one more call. One more call is that do you think that the governance for automation is different than other initiatives which are undertaken by the organizations? You have listened to Simen, same steps, BCP, tick box, narrative controls, tick box. What's new in governance for automation? What do you think? You think it's the same, it's different, or is no difference? The one thing which I have always encountered is meaningful human control. So what should be the meaningful human control in any automated process?
So to me, a key element of a robotic process is that if the robot is doing the work, they will do it consistently. As long as you've done it properly, they will actually roll it out effectively. So the question then actually moves away from the doing of the process to the way you feed the robot. So I'm very focused. I think the real focus on that one is it needs to be on you moving from have you done the screens correctly or have you executed the steps correctly to do you have the right data set up front. So to me, the meaningful human control is on the data set up front. It is not on stopping the robot in the middle and making it work.
So I think I will just launch the results of the poll, and it is more than half think that it is different. Half, 38% thinks it's not different. And I'm seeing quite surprisingly, because I'm in favor of it's different, because you don't have any human intervention left. It's all non-human. And there is no empathy, there is no sympathy, there is less of emotional play in governance now in automation. Why do you think, Simen, people have got different views, yes and no?
So I'm looking at this and saying I'm not actually looking at the question because from my perspective, an automation is an automation whether you do it with a robot or with traditional coding. So I'm surprised that people think it's. So what I hope it means is that they think it should be easier. It's not as much, but that might be one of the questions we're going to have. Compared to typical end-user computing, there are huge benefits of moving away from traditional end-user computing to robotics, mainly because robotics, in most instances, does not mean programming. It means configuration. It's easier things to do. There's less risks in this, and they have a huge amount of benefits compared to traditional EUC. So, but what I see is that in many cases, people say, well, actually, if you automate some activity using Visual Basic and macro-based, then we empower very easily the teams under existing end-user computing policies. But if you do it to robotics, we will drag a lot more, we make it a lot harder. And that to me makes no sense, because if you want the risk of deploying a robot it's significantly less than the risk of running a traditional macro.
Yeah. One thing which I want to also share my experience at one of my clients is that there is no governance required when you do macros, but there's a whole governance required when you want to implement an RPA tool. Why is that?
I think that robotics get a lot of focus, and I think that therefore it's new. Whilst with macros, people have a comfort level with those. By the way, a comfort level which I think is ill-advised, because it keeps on having significant problems. Every one of you who has run large operation with lots of macros in them knows that they keep on creating problems. So again, the other piece to me as well is people will say, well, if you want to automate or change the process using a robotics process, we as global process owners want to be tightly involved. We are very worried about change. And then you see the same guys changing their processes by simply sending out an email with no governance and testing whatsoever. So I think that this is a maturity issue, that people will over time come to realize that there is no reason why this should be more complicated. To me, there is a kind of a ceiling here. In your enterprise, you might be doing a lot of agile development already on the software side. It makes no sense that an RPA environment should be facing more governance than what you would apply to your agile projects.
So Simen, the next step, the next part in our webinar is to share our 4 minutes to share our real life experience, that how you started doing governance in ANZ, how you did it, and what was the real outcome, and what was structure also.
Yeah, so if you look at governance, it's always a journey, I think is the right, I think one of the elements which we did differently than many there was that we basically said, well, we believe that the technology is mature and stable. So therefore, a lot of the pilot, that kind of things were not really where we want to do. We wanted to go to deploy extensively quickly. So we had sessions with all the, we were very clear that the ownership of this should be with the doers. But at the same time, we really wanted to ensure that everyone who had an opinion, relevant opinion in this space, were really engaged. Ran 7, 8 sessions where people from audit, risk, IT security, etc., was involved. I think that that was helpful. We got at least better understanding on this. I think that the challenge here is that there's a lot of people who basically are not happy with what's the case, the current setup around EUC, and therefore they don't want to go on it, they just want to stop it. And I think that's in any organization, is that there is basically, you get into some kind of religious discussion about is it the best way is to automate using end-to-end process change embedded in core platforms, or is it better to do robotics? Is it better to do, so you get into these kind of very esoteric discussions. I think we ended up with a quite reasonable approach for governance. What we found was that throughout this period, actually, internal audit was always very helpful in that they really saw the benefits. If you look for a large-scale human-based processing operation, your biggest problem is human error. We were looking at 90 to 95% of all operational losses being due to human error. And of course, you are trading off reduced risk of human error against increased, some kind of outage risk or fraud risk related to the software. So from our perspective, you trade off a risk with very high likelihood to a risk with very low likelihood, but potentially bigger. So that kind of balancing act is a piece which we all struggle with, I think.
So Simen, can we also answer the questions as you speak about your journey? So what was the key lessons learned in your journey?
I think that one of the key lessons learned is actually, as we've gone along, is that most likely we are overgoing in this space. That people are actually very sensible. A lot of the, so what we did, we leveraged the business excellence community, and we put ownership onto the people running the process. The people who are running the processes, they are not going to be willy-nilly crazy about putting in new stuff in there, because who is going to have to clean it up if it goes wrong? It's them. So in many cases, actually, I think that we were worried that people would go rogue and start doing things. But actually what we found is that there's a deep inherent conservatism amongst the doers. So that's a piece. Second, I think, which we learned as well, I think, is that if you ask most of the managers, they will come to you with their problems. But that's not where you have the volumes. So to me, and the problems are hard to solve. I think you're much better off saying that, so this is part of that governance piece in that, where do you deploy it? So how can you make it simple that we deploy it against areas where it's simple to do, where we get the biggest impact, rather than against the esoteric issues which the customer, some of the managers are worried about. So from our perspective, make your robots dumber, not smarter. So basically make more of them, make them simpler. Therefore, throw more things back again to humans to decide if the robot cannot do it. Let's not, just give an example. Is it a company? Is it an individual? That might have a huge impact on the way you run that process. It's a very difficult decision for a robot to take. You can then say we'll do optimistic processing 9 out of 10 times in an individual we'll go that way. If you then realize it wasn't, we'll throw it out again, back to the human to look at. So, so from our perspective, governance in this is really about empowering and sharing best practice effectively through changing your patterns, rather than controlling people and stopping them from doing something. People want to do the right thing.
So Simon, as per my experience of doing at least 8 RP live engagements, it is mostly run by business, owned by efficiency group, run by business, but with the blessing of IT. So one of the question is that who owns it? So what do you think is the practical answer for that? You have experience in ANZ, who owns it, and what do you think is the right ownership model?
So firstly, I think that the key challenge here is that the enterprise owns it. So it shouldn't be a discussion really about, is it technology, is it operations, is it business change, etc., etc. Ideally, what you need to have is you need to have buy-in from the enterprise. If you have that, typically this discussion goes away, because obviously technology has huge amount of skill sets and capabilities in this space, which is really valuable for any initiative in that area. But obviously, if they feel that, if they, think that robotics is lipstick on domestic animals and are negative to the issue, you will not be successful if they own it. If on the other hand you have areas where technology is basically saying, hey, this is a great tool for us to be able to tactically address shortcomings whilst you're building other strategic solutions, well, then you're in a good area. So I think, again, who owns it? I think you need to look in your organization and saying, do I have a forward-looking technology area who is really looking to automate their own processes? Because there's a huge movement to DevOps in technology itself, which is end-to-end automation of their own deployment and tech configuration management, which is very, very similar to what's happening on the operational side. So obviously, if your company is there, then it would make sense that you leverage the same tool sets they are using. If they are not there, then I definitely think you need to put it with operations.
I just want to let the participant know that we will share the slides with you, and we'll also share the recording with you. And all the questions which we have got 30 questions. 10 is on this slide. There are 2 more slides coming after this. We'll answer all these questions in the email. But for sake of time, we are just discussing the main questions from each of 10 slides. So, Simon, in this slide, one question which I'd like to get answer from you is the metrics for RPA governance. So, what are the key metrics for RPA governance?
So again, it depends a bit on what are you looking for, but what does good mean to me here is that a lot of deployments with few problems. So obviously you need to keep a very tight track on what kind of problems is caused or do you experience through your robotics. So what errors do you see, what kind of situation and why, and therefore so you can build that into your RPA pattern for the future. So I think that kind of what caused problems and why won't it happen again, or wasn't it important enough? And then really what you're trying to do is to get things out there. So to me, again, it's a lot about similar kind of agility, how often do you deploy robots? How successful are those deployments? Those kind of metrics, I think, is really relevant. We are also trying to count simply how many departments, how many processes have robotics in them, because we really wanted to see robotics being deployed very widely.
So Simon, any insights on the hiring for governance, RPA training? How is impacting the human resource management?
Yeah, so finding, this is it's really, finding people who understands business, technology, process improvement and RPA tools are really difficult. And I think we all who's been in this space knows that it's like finding unicorns. What I would say is that in many cases, it's actually much easier to take people who are good on process, understands the business, and train them on how to write robots than trying to do the opposite, find people who's good at writing robots and making them understand the business. So I think that's a huge challenge is around, to me, it's the most powerful change vector you have within an organization. A day-to-day BAU operation, and therefore you want your strongest people in that space.
So one more question before we move to the next slide is, what did you don't know when you started that you wish you would had?
I think that the key piece which I should have thought more about is that a lot of our robots are being fed through Excel. So you have people who input information to Excel. That Excel tool then launches, are able to drive the robots. I think that had I done this again, I would have been much more focused on getting people in, store that information into a database. Because at the moment it's hard to keep track of changes on those, and you just keep on having a lot of information stored in Excel sheets, which gives me a bad feeling.
So just in sake of time, we have also launched a poll. Who is guiding you in your current RPA journey? Because most of the companies are doing internally. Some are using consulting firm, like couple of companies. So like our clients are using us, but we are training them so they can do it themselves. I think it should be in-house owned and governed and executed. So we're just training our clients to go on this journey. But still, I think I want to have the feedback from the audience, the participants, who is helping them in this journey and why they're looking outside or inside, what are the drivers for that. In the meantime, when the polling is going, Simen, can you also let us know how you govern the security and privacy issues in RPA?
Yeah, so so in security you have a couple of issues on. So firstly, you have an issue around which I raised multiple times from people to me, which is around security of the RPA software itself. Can it be hacked? Obviously, it's software. All software more or less can be hacked. But to me, the question then back again is really, why would anyone who has the skill set to hack the software not hack? They're already inside at that point in time. If they can hack, why wouldn't they hack the underlying system directly, which typically are less secure than the RPA software? But the key challenge on security for me is around user access management of the robots, because the answer there is not necessarily simple, because you need to see what is the robot doing. And so obviously if the robot is doing data capture for critical information on which you want maker checker, you might say, well, actually, if the maker, if the checker can then trick the robot, then that becomes a big issue. So that therefore, to me, you need to start looking at not only case by case, what is it the robot is doing? Does this mean that the robot needs to be physically secure from the operational pieces? And I think that's an easier piece to do many times. In terms of robotic passwords, to me, I think you should just treat them exactly like users, normal users, log them into the system and treat them entirely that way.
So one more question I want to ask you here is, Simen, like how you do manage the robots in a BAU environment?
In terms of volume, or in terms of?
In terms of like there's system variations, so how it will impact the automated script. So how you manage that?
So again, what we're looking at is really the people who knows best about these issues are typically the people running those processes. So you want to empower them, it's their robots. What obviously one of the benefits with having robotic RPA versus other things is that it's much easier to spin up the same activity on another. So if you have more volume than what you expected to kind of create more robots, you can more or less do it on the fly. It's a licensing issue rather than a. But again, you know, we were maybe a bit special here because we went with an enterprise license, so we don't need to optimize for robots. You know, so we were happy having more robots. Doesn't really matter. It's just piece of software deployed. Availability.
So Simen, we just got this outcome of the poll that the RPA journey, half of them are doing internally, 30% using consulting firm, 2% incumbent vendor, and 9% non-incumbent vendor. So it is not different than what I'm seeing in the market myself. So out of our 10 engagements, 8 in live production, the incumbent vendor was not there. It was done by us or by the non-incumbent vendor. So can you just share your views on this outcome of the poll? That what do you do? Some consulting firm yourself, or it was all in-house?
Yeah, you know, so obviously, Mohit, we spoke a lot earlier around what to do, but a lot of our focus was really internally and using the vendor. So we use Automation Anywhere, who also helped us directly quite extensively. I think that kind of mix. When you start out, at least, to have someone who has done it before is really valuable, you know. And I think that's you know, I think value like Mindfield can add to this is really to kind of help kickstart your initiatives.
Thank you, Simen. So we move to the next slide of the questions, which is so. Simen, the next question, the 10 questions which we have got is that what are how to track tangible and non-tangible benefit of automation?
You know, so it's one of those things. It's really hard actually to track benefits of RPA because, you know, typically, you know, when you start doing this, you realize the robots only work if they get clean data. So then you need to organize yourself so you get clean data. Just organizing yourself so you create clean data creates benefits by itself, even if you didn't have the robots. Actually, because other people as well want clean data. So, you know, what is the benefit you get from underlying process improvements? What's the benefits you get from, you know, moving to things like Kanban in the process, supported by robots? How much is the robot element? So I think that you get what you measure. So basically, if you say, I really want to know efficiency on robots, they will tell you all the benefits are because of robots. I don't think really that's a meaningful piece. So, you know, I think you should rather say, well, what is the benefits we are getting overall as an institution, you know, from all the activities we are doing, and what, you know, what kind of percentage are we looking for? Is 5% good, 10% good, 15% good? And you have history, you know what you used to get. So from our perspective is you can then say, well, actually, have we lifted this through robotic? Because if you're trying simply to measure the robotic piece, I think you will struggle to get any meaningful data.
So, Simen, you are working for a bank, and the whole of your life you've been banking expert. So, how are the regulatory authority like FSA, ASIC, SEC looking at automation now?
I think it's you know, there's a level of difference. You know, certain areas are very progressive regulatory-wise. You know, where they actually are seeing the benefits coming through by taking down human error, and other people are treating it as end-user computing in general. which generally regulators are more concerned about. So this is one of those areas you really need to look into which regulator is impacting your area. And that said, I think that if you cannot use robots in a way which gives you better control and less operational risk, I think you are deploying them wrongly. Because obviously the robots can do a lot. They will ensure they do things the same way. They will ensure consistency. They can check more things, and they will do, you can ask it to check 3 things before it does anything, and it will always do it. So from my perspective, getting better control, it's not that the regulator is driving this necessarily. From our perspective, it should be you as an enterprise.
So Simen, this is my question to you is like, what controls need to be placed when a robot dies, divorced, or incarnated?
Yeah, so basically, what you need to know, are the robots working or not? So you know that. So to me, that kind of monitoring of activities. Again, new systems, robotic systems have this as a capability. That's built into them. So I think that's a huge advantage of. But to me, I'm looking at this and with robotics, there's a journey there where you go from what I call pets to cattle. So in pets, you kind of treat it as a name. If it gets sick, you fix it. You kind of have a team which cares for it. Cattle, if it gets sick, you shoot it and rebuild it. So that's kind of much more aggressive deployment around that this is a manufacturing technique. It's not a pet. I think that kind of move is going to come.
And Simen, one more question, again, if you could have asked this question is that how to retrain the humans which have been upgraded because of robots. I will not say who have lost a job, but who have been upgraded by using automation.
Yeah, so obviously how I look at this is that before we valued the doing, this person was really good at doing payment transaction. In the future, the job is this person is really good at getting the data sets correct to give to the robots. So it's a different mindset for people to do. But in general, what I would say is most people who work in these areas are people which has great experience and knowledge. This is not something people cannot learn. The question is, do they want to learn? Do they want to amend? And we then need to obviously keep on training people on new things. There's a huge opportunity coming around that, okay, we're doing a lot of transactions, but every one of the transactions have a meaning. And what would the sales guy say if they saw the transaction? What would the risk guy say if they had the transactions? That kind of thinking around that we are not only doing the work, we are trying to understand the underlying meaning in this. Every time you go on Google and do something, it learns something about you. Every time a customer transacts with you, you should learn something about them, and that should help us service them better in the future. There's a different skill set coming up. How it exactly will look like, we don't know yet. But people need to be ready for change because it's definitely is coming.
So we have also launched another poll of the topic for the next webinar and continue progress. So I want to ask Simen one more question is that how you should ensure that RPA governance improves customer experience and employee experience.
Yeah, so one thing which we were looking at was really being very explicit, saying that every robot deployment should hit 4 things at the same time, not either or, but it should be better for our people, so it should make their life easier. It should be better for our customers somehow. It should make their execution faster, more secure, better. It should be better for our shareholders. It should be cheaper to run, and it should be better for control. It should take out operational risk. So from my perspective, you should be looking into whenever you deploy a robot. It shouldn't be we are only after efficiency. We are only after this. You should say actually we want it all.
And What about employee experience?
Yeah, obviously, I think that's core. That you want employee experience to be much. At the moment, some of the employee experience we have in um, uh, is 20 years old. It's terrible. It's green screens. It's 16 different systems. It's all this kind of stuff. Um, uh, we need to make our employee experience much simpler. So and much more. It's better for them, but that's also better for us as enterprise.
So Simon, the polls results are out. So next topic for webinar, they want to be on business case or COE. So we have covered COE partially in this webinar. What are your views on different type of business cases for the automation?
Yeah, I'm a little bit, because from my perspective, ideally, the key idea about robotics is it should be cheap. Mm-hmm. It should be cost effective. It should pay itself back very quickly. So, so if you need to write business cases, unless you're trying to do enterprise change, I'm really struggling a bit, because ideally here, the enterprise takes a view saying we believe that robotics is the right thing to do, buys the right level of technology, and therefore after that, it's about deploying that technology cost effectively. And I think that if you have robotics implementation which has paybacks beyond 6 months, 9 months, most likely you are automating the wrong stuff.
And I use an analogy of T20 cricket and 5-day test cricket. So if anything is 5-day test cricket, I think it's not automation. You lose the benefit of automation. It should be like T20. In 1 month, automate 2 process and move on. If you take more than 1 month or 2 months doing 1 process automation, I think you're losing a business case, value proposition.
Yeah, it's and I think one of the key benefits I was always after in this area is that you go to people, your own people, you ask them how to automate, then you automate it the way they said. All of a sudden, you tap into their innovation capabilities, and they will come up with a lot more benefits. So therefore, instead of boiling the ocean, doing smaller stuff, many of them, creates automatically helps drive a pipeline of future demand for automation. So I think that's a key element here. So to me, if you end up in business case world all the time, I think it's a good question to ask yourself: what would it take for me to break out and make it so cheap that there isn't a business case? How would that look like?
I think looking at the costing currently of doing an automation is quite reasonably cheaper than doing a STP or integration between two IT systems. ID thing is a band-aid approach, but I think it's a more logical approach in terms of value proposition. Simon, I think we are coming into our discussion, and there's one question which has been asked, is that will RPA means end of outsourcing?
No, I think, but it will definitely mean a change in outsourcing, so effectively, if the doing is easy to do, then it's about how do you create the data sets which enables the doing. And that, of course, then moves us into issues around cognitive and machine learning and all that kind of issues. So, all human activity is currently being made easier with technology, and the pace of change in especially around the BPO outsourcing. I don't think we've seen anything yet in terms of how much more can be done in that space. But that said, we're not running out of problems to solve. There's lots of things. There's not many customers as well. You're servicing me too well. I'm too happy. Stop it. They want more, and they want it faster, and they want more efficiency. And I think that's going to continue.
And to conclude that, I think it's my view is that the metrics can be how much automation you have currently done using X number of bots, and what's the potential left going forward. That metrics covers the uncovered market or uncovered potential in the organization. I think we have to wrap it now, and thank you, Simon, again for your time.
Thank you, Mohit.
And what we will be doing, we're sharing these slides with you, recording with you, and what we're also doing that the research report which we did was sponsored by ANZ in the past. we have gone with the online interactive version, where you can ask the questions online to us. So we will be sharing that version of the report with everyone as a token of acknowledgement of being attending this webinar. And it will give you insights, what's happening in the RPA, what are the governance models, what are the pricing structures, what tools are there. And I personally feel that tools will move on, they will grow or get replaced. So I think have a journey keeping in view that these tools will be replaced going forward. And thanks again for your time. I look forward for your feedback to improve our webinar much more productive, effective, and valuable for your time. And please, as always, feel to contact us if you have any issues, any queries on these topics. I will ask Simon if he can spare his valuable time to answer those questions. Thank you very much again. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
So I'll just leave it like this, and then we'll stop.